Welcome to Earth, a Love Story. I'm your host, Robin Lassiter. This time on the podcast, I welcome psychic medium, Wiccan priestess, spiritual minister, and teacher, Linda Rauch. She coached me in pronouncing her last name. How did I do, Linda? Since childhood, Linda has sensed spirit, and her path has been shaped by studying various traditions and developing skills to serve as a bridge between spirit and those seeking guidance. Linda and I had a wonderful conversation about navigating phenomenal experiences, what the world needs now, spoiler, it's love, and so much more. Linda, like me, had an unexpected visitation from what she describes as an ant being, and talks about her work with Outcast goddesses. And for some reason on this episode, I sound like I'm at the bottom of a well. You would think that after all this time I would get my audio right, but it just is what it is. So I'm working on it. It's going to be better. Hang in there with me. Listen to Linda. She sounds great. And before we get into this conversation, an update on the podcast and what's unfolding for me. A few weeks ago, I had my own Duvet day, as Linda calls them. I call it waking up in the apocalypse. I could no longer push away the truth that my body has been feeling for a very long time. The truth that not only is something coming, but something is here. The wheel is turning, the center doesn't hold. A rough beast is slouching its way close. And I didn't realize it, but in some ways I was doing one of those running forward so fast that if you stop, you crash and fall over kind of things. So I stopped and crashed and fell over, and it was exactly what I needed. Years ago, I would have beat myself up about it, decided there was something wrong with me. This time, even though I was alternately crying and sleeping and manically texting friends and unapologetically and fiercely doom scrolling, I was also witnessing it all with eyes of love and trusting the process. I call days like these karmic purges, or timeline collapse. All of the parts of me moving at different speeds and at different capacities come together in a glorious and horrible and painful disintegration, which is ironic because they always seem to result in integration. They are really messy, days like these, and ugly. It's the mud and the blood. My teacher used to say that she loves it when a woman says it's all falling apart. And I get that. The day after this collapse, I felt washed clean. I felt like I was looking at a clear blue sky. And I didn't have the typical vulnerability hangover, even though I had very messily bared my soul to lots of people. And partly that's because I have developed enough self-love to care for myself, and partly because my amazing council of friends never made this breakdown feel like it needed to be transformed quickly into a breakthrough. They just held me while it all came apart. They were the container, and I shattered inside. And this whole experience was the culmination of something that's been building all year. Have you guys noticed this year, since early January, the throat chakra has been getting an upgrade? And that's my meaning making around it. Anyway, I've heard others say the same. For me, it's been this sense that something is dying to come through. And there's been some anguish, some losing my voice, some literal throat closing panic attacks. And I've been working with that consciously with, again, trusted friends and with a therapist. And now with a really cool therapist, by the way, who has room for all of my wildness. And now, on the other side of this underworld journey, this Duvet day that I had, this karmic purge, my throat is clear. What came through on the washed clean day afterwards was a complete download of a 9-episode series on the apocalypse. I'm not sure exactly the name. It's a mouthful. I used to ask them to give me pithy, because they used to give me mouthfuls, and then at some point I was like, okay, that's enough pithy, I need the mouthful again, and this is a mouthful. So it's going to be something like frames, containers, vessels, maps for the apocalypse. And for now, I will be releasing it in Patreon, hopefully starting this week, but Let's be clear, I am a projector in human design. I have a defined heart center, and I have this pulse of energy, and it comes when it comes, and when it's not there, it's not there. So we shall see. That's part of this apocalypse series, this change from doing things according to an external schedule versus doing things according to our internal energy. And so coming soon to Patreon, I will be releasing this 9-episode series. My voice is changing. My throat has cleared, and I need to practice speaking plainly. I need to practice using my voice in a new way. And as for this podcast, Earth, a Love Story, I am going to be talking with a few more folks coming soon. I have this episode and then 2 more. And then I will awkwardly end season 1 of this podcast. It'll be at like episode 78 or something. I don't know. But this iteration of the podcast is coming to a close for now. And then I will release season 2, this 9 weekly episodes on frames and containers and maps and vessels for the apocalypse. That is coming, I would say, in a month or 2. It'll take me a minute to get through the episodes that are up next. But after that, weekly episodes of season 2 about the apocalypse. And then I'll feel into season 3. I don't know what it's going to be, but I imagine I'll continue to have guests, and we're going to continue to talk more about the themes from the 9 episodes of the apocalypse season 2. I don't know if any of that made sense, but this is what it is now. So here we are together. We'll figure it out. What I do know, officially announcing season 2 of Earth, a Love Story, that will launch in a few months. And if you want the apocalypse series sooner than it will be released here, then join us in Patreon. You can join at the $5 tier. It'll be available to everybody who joins. If you want to do the $10 tier, we meet twice a month and have live conversations. So you also get the apocalypse series in that. And finally, last little bit before we move on to the episode, the construction of the Mystery School for the Brokenhearted is humming along. It's emerging. It has a life of its own, and it's calling in people who feel the resonance. And that makes me uncomfortable, to be honest with you. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if you guys think I know what I'm doing, but I don't. I'm doing my best is what I'm doing. It makes me nervous to see this thing forming that seems to want to be born through me and others. And those others are showing up and asking and like tapping their fingers. Where's the Mystery School for the Brokenhearted? What is it? I don't know what it is, but I want to be a part of it. I'm like, okay. So it is quickening, and it's coming soon. And by soon, I mean whenever it lands in my body. All right. We're in a brave new world, and it's time to be brave new people. It's time for me to speak more plainly. So, welcome to the mess. All right, that's it, and that's all. Please enjoy my conversation with Linda.
You know, what you do is similar to what I do, in the sense that we help people navigate through what is, as you know, and quite a few of us know, one of the most challenging times, certainly in the last 100 years, maybe. Who knows what was before? I don't know. But astrologically, we know that there's an awful lot going on. And the main thing for me about what is happening is that we can't tell anymore the difference between what is real and what is not real. There's very little trust around. You know, there was such a cultural understanding in most cultures that there's a code that you follow, and those codes have just broken down everywhere. And what happens is people withdraw and they become more and more insular, which is great in the sense that they end up doing things like listening to podcasts and doing internet courses, but it stops people from communicating with each other, and they're becoming more and more fearful of actually making contact. And I know my son is 25, and with his age, you can't pick up the phone and phone him. That is really weird. You have to text first. You know, you can't do that. You certainly can't drop into someone's house. There's no fluid communication. The pubs, certainly in England, the community spaces elsewhere, I know, are just being developed. And as houses and the community spaces are limiting, and we are just becoming more insular and more fearful. And so, what is needed by people like you and people like me is to offer options and hope and keep that hope alive. And that is really hard at the moment. And it feels like there are these waves that come and they just, they're huge waves. Something happens in the world, and all of a sudden the hope goes, and then you're just kind of pumping people up again. But the main thing that I do to try and allow people to get through these hard times is to find their own truth. And that's all we can really do, because we absolutely, there's a radio station, there's a TV channel for every single view and perspective of everything that's going on right now. You switch onto one channel and you hear something, some statistics, and the next channel, it's completely different. And this has probably been going on all along. To some degree, we've been manipulated, by the media, etc. I remember doing media studies at school. We're talking about, over 40 years ago, and about the manipulations that can be done. But I think now it's got to the stage now where it is, 90% manipulation or something ridiculous. So yeah, so that's kind of become my task. Not that I intended it to be that way, because I was just kind of working my way through life, working with whoever turned up. But that seems to be the main thing that I'm doing now.
I so appreciate you bringing that up. It's something that I often, like, I feel called to talk about it a lot, and I don't feel like I've fully expressed it. What it feels like to me is that we are in a time, like, it's not even that it's coming, it's that it's here, that we are in a
Yeah.
time that through a screen, it's very difficult to tell what reality is. And it's getting to the point that it's impossible. I'm thinking I'm having this sensation of like grasping onto something, like my lifeline is our own personal experience and trusted community. And that if we can build those up, faith in our own experiences and trust in our own experiences, and then real relational community that is trustworthy, so that when things do happen, we can actually connect with real people and not see it through filters of different kinds of media. That feels like what the ground is going to be. And I'm so grateful for the internet, that we can do this across the world and that we can draw communities together. And I'm also really feeling the desire and the need for in-person connection. But I'd love to know, how you came into engagement with these other worlds, something beyond consensus reality, something beyond materialism. How did you get here?
Sure. Well, I started as a young child. I always saw, I don't know what, but I always saw beings in my room. I was terrified that they couldn't access my arms. So I had to sleep under the bed, and I would always shout for my parents to come in and wrap me really tightly so that my arms were kept inside. Who knows what that was about? But I was very open from from a very young age. I used to see beings in fairy beings, probably in shrubs and plants and such like, and so I had a sense that there was more to life. I was connected to the subtle realms. And then I had pre-cognitive experiences as a teenager, and they got more and more intense. So I would have a dream about an airplane crash, and in those days there was, two channels on the TV and a radio if you're lucky. And I would wake up, and then the next time I saw the news, the same images of that plane, I would see them. And I knew my grandmother was going to die. She was in hospital, but she was doing okay. But I sneaked out of school and got a bus by myself for the first time because I wanted to see her before she died. And she died later on that day, unexpectedly. And I saw a friend's friend falling down a mountain, and he had a mountaineering accident. So, I would see things a lot, and it was building up. It was getting very, very intense. And then it just stopped. And I think at that stage, the powers that be, and who knows what they are, whether they are extraterrestrial, whether they're angels, whether they're spirit guides. I don't know. I don't like to put names or assumptions about anything. But whoever the guides and the guardians are beyond my own experience, possibly it's my own unconscious as well, who knows, they shut it down, which was really useful because I was having very, just the usual kind of teenage trauma anyway. And then all sorts of things happened to me as I developed through my 20s. I had this obsession with studying anything esoteric, anything I could get my hands on. And literally, the library had two books, one about Greek mythology, can't even remember the other one. There was no internet, the TV channels never showed anything interesting. So I was really, short of material, but got a little bit older and I could start to go to study. I studied astrology and Greek mythology, and then anything, palmistry, you name it, anything that came along. And I did course after course after course. I then, well, it just went on. It went on. I had some shamanic training. I lived in South Africa for a while. I trained as a photographer. And anything that came to me that was part of my journey. And then in terms of the sense of presences, that was still there. And I didn't really do anything about it. And I had a lot of fear around it. And then one day I got to kind of the dark night of the soul stuff. I got to the stage in my life I was just very stagnant and bored. And my friend said to me, the only thing you haven't really done is mediumship. Go and study. And I did. In the first workshop I went to, we did a chakra cleansing and it got to the solar plexus, and a little candle behind me that was a batteried candle that hadn't worked for 4 years, apparently, according to the teacher, suddenly went on when I had this solar plexus kind of massive awakening. I just felt this surge of energy. And then immediately after that, I was seeing spirit again. And then I've just kind of carried on developing as a medium. Although before that, I was doing my witchcraft and had my Wiccan initiation. I always forget exactly how long ago, at least 30 years ago now. So I was sensing energy, I was invoking gods and goddesses, I was feeling crystals, I could read crystals, I could do psychometry, but I wasn't doing the actual mediumship where I could bring through people who passed from the other side. Um, and then, the exo studies work I did with Sean, can never pronounce his surname, and Jay, I met Jay doing that. And I'd always been obsessed with, not obsessed, but fascinated in extraterrestrial life. I came across a crop circle when my son, so that's 20 years ago, my son was 5. And that was it. Went to the crop circles every year after that and saw amazing things. Saw a crop circle being made from the top of Silby Hill, saw some spaceships and had amazing experiences. So that's it in a very small nutshell.
Wow. Thank you so much. There's so much in there. I appreciate you talking about how it was scary, and
Yeah.
I wonder if you had support in your family or if there was anything around you in your culture anywhere that supported you through the early years until it stopped for the first time kind of after your teens. Because I know from my experience that time was so confusing and it really felt like I had to compartmentalize it and sort of split that part of myself off. And it has been a real lifelong journey to welcome it back in and also discern what I want to be in contact with or the type of contact that I'm okay with having, etc. So I wonder if there's anything similar along those lines for your journey.
Yeah, sure. I was brought up in a traditional Jewish family, not an Orthodox Jewish family, not religious, but very conservative, suburban environment. And so I was the weirdo from day one in terms of my interests. Literally from when I started talking about fairies, I got a reputation, and two older brothers who teased me, and my little sister who was interested as well. She kind of was like, "Yeah, this is exciting." But my parents' attitude was, "If it makes you happy, dear, okay, we're not going to give you a hard time, but if it makes you happy." And that's actually become a big part of my work because the the problem is that for sensitive people, they're drawn to this kind of work. And then because they know there's more, they know there are subtle realms. They don't know what they are, but they sense it. So they're drawn to this work. And then they get, you know, marginalized or pushed out or teased even more. And so the wounding increases dramatically the more they step into their truth. And so a lot of my work with my students is to talk about that and to be okay with who they are and step into their own power, not only their own truth, but their own power, to recognize that, yes, the wounding that they had as they went along doesn't have to rule who they are now. So yes, absolutely. And I've always been an outsider, and I think that's part of my interest in extraterrestrials because I know what it's like to be an outsider, and they're outsiders as far as we're concerned. And so I've always been attracted to people on the fringe of one thing or another. And in fact, I'm doing work at the moment with my students on the outcast goddesses because they bring in a lot of power and a lot of energy. Like Hecate, for example, she comes in and she's like in her power, even though she's really pushed aside and like no one wants to hang out with Hecate. But actually, really, when you look at it, she carries this incredible transformational power. So I worked in San Francisco General for many years with dying heroin addicts during the AIDS epidemic. They all had AIDS. That was part of my caseload. They had to have AIDS. They had to be triple diagnosed with psychiatric illness, addiction, and AIDS. So that was they were really on the edge. I traveled to South Africa to work with the Black South African communities out there, and was an outcast and an outsider there. I was an outsider for being Jewish when I was young, growing up in England, beaten up at school for being Jewish and teased for that. And I was an outsider in my own community because I was a woman. And you can't access the real esoteric wisdom unless you are deeply entrenched in the very Orthodox Jewish community, in which case, as a woman, you only have limited access to that kind of work. So I was involved with an Orthodox community for a while because I wanted access to that, the Kabbalistic information. I knew it was so amazing and powerful, but I realized I couldn't live that life. So in that sense, I didn't belong. So it's taken all these years, and I'm in my early 60s now, and it's like, oh, okay, I am an outside, I'm an outcast, and a witch, of course, being a witch, you're kind of an outcast. So I've had that throughout. And now it's like, you know what? That's the way it is. And I'm going to help other people feel comfortable with that and step into their power with that and look at all the reasons why that archetypal energy makes you a very compassionate person, understands suffering, allows you to kind of expand your sensitivities. There's many different gifts along the way as an outcast. But it is painful, and it's a pain that I carry ancestrally, of course. Coming from an immigrant ancestry where my grandmother left Russia, left Ukraine during the pogrom. She was 17. She never saw any of her family again. Her first child froze to death, etc., etc. So that's that generation, and the generation before, and the before that, and before that, and afterwards. It just continued on. So the feeling of the outcastness that I sense from the outcast extraterrestrial beings that I've connected with, if I sense that energy. I mean, E.T., for example, it was like, wasn't treated very well in that movie. It's like they're pushed away. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to engage. We don't want to deal with them. They're scared of them. And yet they're really, at the moment, probably our only hope, because we are not managing as a human species very well on our own. So yeah, so that's a very long answer to your question.
I love it. Thank you so much for that wonderful answer. And I'm hearing all of that thread that has run through all of this for you, and also hearing it hasn't stopped you. You've done these amazing things. It feels like your journey has been through that and not hindered by that. I don't know if that's exactly right. I'm sure that there were some hindrances, but it really does feel like the power of going through that and kind of doing it anyway is what kind of crafted this thread of life, that you've lived. It's very extraordinary. And yeah, it's something that I wrestle with a lot. So I'm just also personally fascinated by it. I know you're very connected to spirit, very connected to guidance. And I wonder how you navigate trusting that information and then also weave that in with your corporeal incarnate self. I Part of my work and part of the like these questions that come up for me over and over again is how to navigate that relationship between like spirit and human. And I think that for me and for a collective of people in the past, maybe 30, 40 years, the message is very often there's actually something wrong with being incarnate. Ascend out of this, only think happy
Yeah.
thoughts, get as close to spirit as possible, reject the corporeal. And that's not my path. And there's this interplay because it's not just being incarnate either. It's not cutting off spirit at all. It's finding the balance there, finding agency and trust. And it
Yeah.
is such a rich and fertile and like confusing place for me at
Yeah.
times. And so I would love to hear your take on that.
So there are a few things there, and you may have to remind me as we go along. But the first thing is you asked me the question earlier, and I don't think I kind of fully answered you. The support part of it. I have been extremely lucky or synchronous or guided to have be put in the right place at the right time. So many times where I meet the right teacher, I join the right course, something happens. And so I have for a large part of my life just kind of gone along with whatever happens in a quite an arrogant way, really. It's like, oh well, yes, I've landed up living in the most amazing place. It's like people don't get to do this, but I just kind of assumed that's, well, great, fine, just carry on and take it as it is. So I've had that kind of guidance. The My father was a lawyer, and he was very black and white about a lot of things, and he taught me discernment. So, in terms of what I felt safe with, I was very lucky because all the teachers that I came across, there was always a part of me that questioned their, their humility, number one, their true compassion and kindness, their authenticity, and what their agendas were. And I was very, very highly attuned to that from a very young age. And honesty, my father used to insist if we found a penny on the floor in those days, we had to take it to the police station. It was like a thing he did with us. So I've tried to maintain that level of honesty as much as I can, but it has made me acutely aware of that. And I use that when I am connected. I'm not one of these woo-woo spiritual people that's like, oh, wow, someone with a white dress went past. I'm definitely getting married. I don't do that. I read Jung synchronicity books and writings many, many years ago. I know there's something there, but I don't understand what this bleed through from the universe, what it always means. I just pay attention and I don't hold on tightly to any dogma at all. And in terms of kind of the ascension stuff, I was burnt very severely about nearly 20 years ago by a group of people who were very much about Advaita consciousness work that, just this doesn't exist. And because this doesn't exist, you can cheat people, you can betray people, you can do whatever you like because this doesn't exist. And I did a lot of work on that and looked at consciousness to the point that I had what was known as a second birth in 2012, I believe it was, which is like an embodied awakening through a Advaita sort of kind of embodied invite a path called Waking Down Mutuality at the time. And so I had that experience of seeing beyond reality as we perceive it. And yes, I've experienced that void where there is nothing. I've experienced that. And yet I still have to pay my taxes. I still have to make my bed. I still have to take my mum to the doctor, you know? And there is a lot of juice in that. I believe, I loosely use that word, that we are here to learn our lessons through that corporeal experience. Otherwise, this would not exist. There would be no point in this. So that's what makes sense to me. So I don't give up on life. The thought of being taken up to a mothership and taken elsewhere, I don't think I really want to do that at this stage, because even though the shit is hitting the fan, excuse my language, and we are seeing the worst of humankind, it's still the most beautiful planet. And I've got my cats. I love my cats. I love my family. I love looking out the window at the trees. There's still the human experience that I absolutely love. Last part of that, I can't remember what it was that you said. I don't know whether I've answered all your questions. And
Thank you. I know I ask like multi-layered questions. I just talk for a while and
fine.
then
Yeah, no, it's lovely. Lovely.
you did answer it, and very beautifully. I think if there was anything else in there, just this question of how you work with your own agency and your own intuition and what comes to you through other beings or spirit, something like that.
I have a lot of students, because I work with beginner students mostly, who are starting on their journey with mediumship or witchcraft or tarot or whatever. And they all are immediately, how do I protect myself? I've got to protect myself. Have I got the right crystals? Have I said the right prayer? Whatever. And I say, if you have the right intention and you stay in a vibration of positivity, and I know you said earlier about, be happy and jolly all the time. It's not about being happy and jolly all the time. It's just that if you connect with that frequency, that lightness of frequency, that's where spirit resides. So if you go to a spiritualist church, they sing hymns beforehand or songs. They have to get everybody's spirits up. They say a few jokes, because the more kind of up you get, the closer, more easily you can connect to the vibration of spirit who are in the higher realms of positivity. That's where they reside. They reside in love. And the purest way to connect, particularly with animals, is through that feeling of unconditional love. So if you muster up this love that you've had for a puppy or a baby, and you just like, oh, I just love it so much. And then you take a deep breath and invite in whoever's going to work with you, and see this animal in front of you that's being presented, who you want to communicate with, and just say hello. And you say hello from that place of absolute love. And then you listen, and in your imagination, because that's the faculty that you read this stuff through, you will hear it. Now, in terms of sovereignty, I have these discussions all the time, as I said, with my students. I think that most of what we experience that is negative or difficult or uncomfortable is man-made. So we are thinking we're going to be had, or we're going to be taken away, or things are going to be done to us. And we open that door for that to happen. So I just take ownership of what happens to me. And I had an ant being turn up. I had a really terrible headache, and I was lying on my bed, and I looked up, and there he was, and he was huge. And I was like, oh, for God's sake, what are you doing here? You're in my bedroom, and I've got this terrible headache. And if you can't get rid of my headache, I am not interested in even talking to you. It's like, no, my terms. And the headache went. I couldn't believe it. It was just like that. And then I think we there were a few words spoken. He said something to me. and it was something to do with, I can't even remember the details now, but I looked up what he'd said because it was some kind of connection to an old myth or something, and I looked up and it was verified, or there was something, there was a myth that he was talking about that was I didn't know about, that was had been documented or written about. So I think that many of these experiences are real. I think if you are in your own power, and if you are doing credit to your talents and your gifts and your abilities, and you are in a process of unfolding who you are joyfully, as joyful as possible, because it's hard, then you will attract the right kind of beings. It's like attracts like. I'm a homeopath. Homeopathy is all about like attracting like. You can feel it. You feel it. I guess I've learned to use my body as a vessel of discernment.
The only person that I've ever heard say that they've had a connection with an ant being, that was one of the very first connect beings that came to me when I was, 4 or 5 years old, something like that was, and I called him Ant-Man as a 4 or 5
Oh,
year old. I
wow.
didn't know what to do with any of it. And so that's really interesting. I just had to,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Wow.
to note that because that's very, very, you're the only one
Wow.
that I've ever heard say
Wow.
something
Well,
like that.
he's
Yeah.
never been back before or since, and no one that you see, I feel, I sense things in my imagination, in my
Mhm.
imaginative faculty. But this was an experience where I don't say that he was actually physically there. If someone else had come in, I don't think they would have perceived him, but it felt like it felt like his presence was there, and there was residual, or there was existing physical presence as well as an energetic presence in some way. Very powerful. And I have no idea
Yeah,
why.
interesting. Me neither. I still don't know. I still don't know. I'm just gonna, because I, feel comfortable and I think that we can kind of talk about any of this. I have really been at a threshold for a long time about what you're talking about keeping, connected to power, to a higher vibration, to, as you say, like, are you aligned with your gifts? Are you, and that has been a really tricky place for me for such a long time because I remember being a little kid and being terrified because I remember times when it didn't feel consensual. I remember times, and I remember experiences when negative experiences happened and I was too young to have a high vibe or a low vibe. Like I was truly in whatever flow and presence I was in. And so I think that for me, there's always danger of like, it's such a slippery slope to not victim blame or to spiritually bypass and say, and here's the thing, and people have heard me say that a million times. It's like it's such a core part of my journey. I stay very connected to kind of the shadow realms, to the
Mm,
dark, even
yeah.
though, and I don't mean
Yeah, yeah.
dark as in bad or evil or anything like
No, no,
that,
I know
but
what you
the sort of pole of the light, to make, and
Yeah.
I think the reason for that is I'm bringing the light into the dark. I'm bringing that love into the places that haven't received it. The feminine, the goddesses, as you're talking about, like all those places that have really been pushed away, bringing that immanence to those places. And so, again, people have heard me say this ad nauseum. It's such a central part of my work. And now, because I'm so centered there, and because I feel like there's nothing that I will kind of push away or abandon anyone else's pain or anyone else's grief or trauma or anything like that. Like I feel like I have so much space and capacity for it. I'm so grounded in it that now it's like I can see the others. I'm starting to see the light. I'm starting to understand frequency and vibration. I'm starting to feel like there is a choice, not abandoning any of the dark, any of the trauma, any of the grief or suffering. Like I'm in a Buddhist lineage, suffering exists. And
Yeah.
I did a lot of damage to myself by putting on blinders and pretending it didn't. And if I could just pretend it didn't, then I would be in that
Yeah.
high realm where there's spirit and all of that. And I have to say now, my feet are on that ground so solidly that now I'm starting to explore. that now I have choice to engage with the world in a particular way that is lighter and that is coming from a place of more trust and openness. And it's always love. Like I've always been deeply connected to love. Um, but like joy, that's a huge part of the mission I was given, move from evolution through suffering, which is where I'm grounded in that reality that evolution through suffering works.
Yeah.
And also that I was given this mission to move from evolution through suffering to evolution through joy and help make that paradigm shift on the planet, which I think is what is happening in the broader world. I think we're seeing the shadow. I think we're seeing our collective shadow in a way that we've never seen it before. And so I think the world is going down into the underworld through a dark night of the soul. And I think that on the other side of that, that we're going to have to collectively learn how to do evolution through joy. And so I'm doing it, and I'm really finding this edge of like having to practice joy and having to practice lightness and being in power and connected. So thanks for letting me say all of that. And because it's just so alive for me right now.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And it takes you have to go through that journey to get to that point. Because I think when you're a young child, especially if you're sensitive, you're going to pick up fear and negativity in your world. And that's so who knows what beings are kind of going to be that you're picking up and reading and feeling into and being open to. You see that with children, you see that with children who come from difficult families, and it's just they're the ones that fall down in the playground. They're the ones that happen to lose, their money, or that shit happens. It's just that they're carrying that vibration that exists in their environment. Plus, also, let's not forget that, there's the ancestral burden. So we carry stuff. And I can't imagine getting to a point in my life where I won't go into my duvet days, my impending doom days, where nothing is ever going to feel right. And I can't ever imagine coming out of it. And I have to remind myself that often it's the precursor to some big awakening that I have. Something really special will happen at the end of it spiritually. My grandmother she was diagnosed manic depressive. It was severe PTSD that she had, but she was carrying her ancestry, which I'm carrying hers, and mine and those. And so we have the ancestral burden that we carry, and who knows what that vibration sends out. But there's also the fact that there are guiding forces, and we're not left alone with this stuff. So if you've had extreme trauma in your life, really difficult background, you're around a child that's around a lot of really heavy stuff, you still have your guidance with you. You still have those amazing beings, whoever they are, that make sure that you're learning the lessons that you need to learn. And I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in 2022, just during COVID. And I spent a year crying, and I went back into therapy again. And, just what happened? How could this happen? I'm a homeopath, blah, blah, blah. And at the same time, I had just finished this review that I'd done, which I did as a course, Natural Tales of Tales of a Natural Born Psychic, Natural Born Medium, something like that anyway. And I had tracked all these things in my life and seen that even though I was messing up as a teenager, and I was sleeping around as a young adult, and I was in terrible relationships, there was always this guidance, always throughout. And having that perspective helps with that joy as well. It helps you understand, because you get a sense of that unconditional force of love. And so you can let go of the suffering because you see it as a means to an end, as you've just said, and also a means of a way through, which is also what you said earlier. So
That's
yeah,
very beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. There is a magic grace, something
yeah,
that arrives in the darkest moment. And I was just reading Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she described it as like a wingtip brushing your shoulder. Like just when, you're completely alone, there's nothing, there's no answer, you're lost in the dark forest, and then something arrives and you realize you're not alone and you never have been. And that I'm very grounded in as well. That feels like it makes it bearable, right? And makes it
Oh,
possible and
yeah.
makes it us able to get through to something, which is beautiful. Is there anything that you want to talk about that's really up with your work or that is alive in you in these times, right, that we're going through?
Well, in my work, most of my work right now, I just did the Shift Network course, or just finishing it off, which is Secrets of the Witch's Cauldron. And we're coming to an end of it. And it was really great because it gave me an opportunity to really deepen my understanding of witchcraft. And I've always considered myself a witch, but I've been solitary, doing my own thing. I don't have any rules, I don't follow any particular programs or traditions. I was in reclaiming for a while, but definitely not part of that now. And just found my own way, doing my own thing. And what's happened and what's kind of really become obvious to me is how powerful the idea of witchcraft, and I almost want a different name for it, but again, so many of the things that we're talking about are poo-pooed by the academics. You can't, whole idea of extraterrestrials with academics doesn't fit in. The whole, homeopathy with medical academics or practitioners doesn't fit in. So even talking about this is just, there's a part of me that goes, oh no, you have to be careful what you say because witchcraft isn't taken seriously. So it's not the not being taken seriously bit that worries me as much of the fact that people don't look at this path because it's associated with Harry Potter or the Omen or whatever. But the cauldron of witchcraft is amazing because you have a series of high holy days, equinoxes, and solstices. You are trained to use the seasons and use the moon phases to basically be on top of what's going on for you right now. And that's, probably 90%, 95% of the population is a complete guess, has no clue what's going on for them at all. And so it makes you look at each Sabbath, you'll think, you do a spell about what's up for you, really. What would you like to improve? What would you like to work on? And then you've got the gods and goddesses. Like for me, with the Outcast goddesses are really powerful for me because being Jewish, it's really hard. We're 0.2 of the population, and we're not the favorite people at the moment. And I'm almost more afraid to say I'm Jewish than to say I'm a witch, which is there's people killing witches in parts of the world still. And yet that's something that feels empowering and strong. And I'm not necessarily an outcast as a witch anymore, but as a Jewish person, I am. And so that is that is really a powerful process for me to come to terms with that I'm back into that thing of, you know, who do I feel safe with? Who can I trust? Who's going to love me anyway? Who's going to see that I'm Jewish and be okay with me hanging out with them anyway? Really odd things that come into my mind, which is old language, old beliefs. But it's the world. It's what is going on in the world. And I think I'm having to go through this on a personal level. What I'm getting out of this is that pretty much every student that I have is going through or has gone through something very, very similar. And we're all needing to recognize that we're still making judgments based on political views and realizing that politics actually diminishes my ability to stay in contact with spirit because I'm no longer in the flow. So, how do I feel right now? And the magic that happens to me in this moment with witchcraft and everything. So, that's up with me. It's something I can put on my altar. It's something I can pay attention to. It's something I can nurture and love and work on healing. And that I can assess and see how I feel about it next week. Maybe it's shifted next week. And how has it shifted? And what's up for me then? So, it's a really powerful way of working with self reflection and self understanding. And it's not a victim thing. It's like, we need to become empowered. We need to step into who we are. And I'm a Jewish witch mother. I still go between, am I a hippie or am I, a housewife? It's like, who am I? I'm 63 and I'm still like, who am I? So I'm still trying to work that out. And that's okay. That's normal. That is what is going on in the world. People don't know who they are. And if they don't know who they are, they judge others. And then they start wars. I don't know if that answers
Thank
your
you.
question.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, that it reminds me of something that the 4-Horror-1 gave me, which was the honeycomb matrix. And they said, it was about where you place your attention and the quality of your attention. And that
Yeah.
that shifts reality. Like reality changes based on those things. And that as you were talking about that weekly check-in and the reflection and what's up for me and how can I work with it and what's alive and putting your attention on that every single week and following that changes things, that it really changes things. And we are in, an attention economy. As you've been talking as well, I've been thinking over and over again, this shift that feels like it's here. I used to say it's coming, right? It's like something's coming, it's like it's here. We're in it. I feel this rise of the empowerment of the sensitive or the witch or the healer, the tarot reader, the psychic, the one who gets messages in their dreams, the one who was visited, the person who has had the experiences and seen through reality in some way. And it feels
Yeah.
like there is a sort of changing of positioning energetically or even culturally that's happening in waves or very slowly. And as you were saying at the beginning of our conversation, just needing to give people a place to get bolstered, to be like, you're not crazy. I believe you, and help people come into their own power, not even to believe necessarily in a certain dogma or school of thought or a particular tradition. Like it doesn't really matter, but everybody finding what resonates for them specifically so that they feel empowered and can kind of stand in the world through these chaotic times. I've been perceiving more and more that there's a collective of us who is sort of like holding it down while the broad collective goes through a dark night of the soul. But there are some of us who are just holding the frequency while that happens. And that takes a lot of self-confidence, courage, resourcefulness, discernment, as you said, like an ability to not be swayed in either direction, not follow the synchronous like breadcrumb trail that ends with your own insanity. Like I've been on
Yeah.
that path, like you can follow the signs until you've walked yourself in circles. And also not to discount those things, but to find some sort of mature path through that, because most people that I know in these spaces like just really want to be of help. They want to
Yeah.
bring goodness into the world, love. It's just really, really needed right now. So it sounds like that's what you're doing in your communities as well.
Yeah, I'm really trying. I mean, I'm doing it through the a business model, which is really tough because that's not how I perceive this should be working. But that is the truth and the reality of using the structures that we have that are recognized, acknowledged, and encouraged to be able to bring the divine feminine, which is, essentially what is going on, this nourishing energy, this energy that holds the mysteries, this energy that nurtures and breastfeeds a million billion people. It's like that's that beautiful energy that needs to come through. And yet it has to come through those very masculine structures, whether it's publishing or whatever it is, it has to be. So it goes through a system where people are initially attracted because they're not sure what they're getting. It's not that they're coming for community. they're kind of opening the book because they're not sure what life is about and they're looking for solutions. And then, within that context, I try and be as creative as possible and open up opportunities for people to come together, which is why we ended up, 42 of us in a hotel in just outside of London. And it was incredible. These people, most people were from America or Canada. They came, ridiculously long journeys. Some people got two jobs so that they could come, and they just wanted to see, it wasn't me. They wanted to see each other. They wanted to be together. It's really, really important. But I have to say that it's important to recognize that most people have lost their codes, that those kind of the Bible, the Ten Commandments that people lived by, their moral codes that they lived by in their communities over the generations that their parents, grandparents lived by. They've lost those codes. And if they are not totally in alignment with their own guides that are giving them universal codes of humility and compassion and integrity, which is very difficult to hold the whole time, then in community, the community will still be a community of humans that are damaged and wounded after generation upon generation of issues and hours of being bombarded by the internet or, so we're not a very healthy group to get together. So getting together is very important, but it's getting together with the knowledge that might go wrong sometimes. You might get hurt a little bit. And then you just go throw that back into your cauldron, let it mix away, let it, foam up, let it burn away, let it transform, let it become something else, let it make you stronger. That actually, yeah, you can accept that in other people, that other people are not perfect. It's not Hollywood. It is a hard thing to be asking people to do right now.
Yeah, right. Because if the root wounds have not been sort of thoroughly lived with and loved and brought back into wholeness. And even if they have, we still all have shadow. We still all have things that operate through us that are unconscious and express in particular ways. I'm part of several communities, and I'm very, very grateful that there are these core guidelines about how we relate to each other, and
Yeah.
that in my spiritual community, in my spiritual tradition, a huge part of it is ethics. And my teacher says ethics are protective, and you're talking about these codes that we've lost. And that was some of the earliest part of the training in this spiritual lineage is, and continues to deepen and deepen. There are vows, there are bodhisattva vows, I'm in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and they are both generative in terms of karma, and they're also incredibly protective in terms of karma, that we're not creating karma that is going to harm us in the future. And it gives us guidelines. And I think so. I thought, I got it. Like, I won't kill anybody. I'm not going to steal, but then we continue to work with these vows and these codes, it's astonishing to find that, like, oh, but do I steal in small ways? Do
Yeah.
I waste someone's time, or do I, take something from someone's energy that I shouldn't? And it just gets more and more and more subtle. And it was a huge relief to have those codes,
Mm.
because, as you said, we don't have the external structures anymore at all. You can find anything to justify anything right now.
Yeah.
Even, people that like me, I think I'm a good person. I want to be a good person. Having the codes and the vows brings my attention to things that I didn't even know I could improve on. And it feels really important to do that work and to try to build as much like self accountability and safety and community. And also then know, as exactly as you said, like, you're probably going to get hurt at some point. We're going to all do our best, and something's still gonna happen because we kind of forgot how to be in community, and we need to
Yeah.
figure it out again. So
No, that sounds wonderful that you've got that. And I have a couple of guides, again with spirit guides. I'm not attached to the idea that they are actually there. I don't know. But my sense is that there are two beings in particular that helped me. And one of them is, I think, a grey. I don't know. I only ever saw the side of her face when I met her in a crop circle, and like split second. I had like 5 minutes in this crop circle, and suddenly this big head was next to me, and it's like, oh, whoa, what's going on here? And it was beautiful. She showed me a elongated love heart. She kept showing me this, and I was like, why is she showing me this? And the farmer was coming to cut down the crop circle, so we had like minutes to be there. And so I was kind of deep in meditation, connecting with her. Wow, okay, great, thanks for the heart. I'm off, and off I went. And it was my birthday, and I went home, and there was my son and his girlfriend. They'd made me a birthday cake with an elongated heart on it.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's beautiful. So she's been with me for quite a while. And the other one is a very old, I think he was a rabbi or some old Jewish guy and in the probably 1800s. And he just sits in the corner and he's very kind of, grumpy. But they are my coach.
Mm.
If I say to and also my father who comes through, and my grandmother who's my main has always been my main support and guide. It's like I check in with them. I check in with them when I remember. Don't always remember, and then the mistakes happen. But they become my guide, and that's important too for people to kind of get their own personal guidance as well as an external code if there's one that works for them as well. Because we can't trust the rabbis, the priests. We can't trust anyone that hasn't done their work, and not everybody has.
Yeah, and teachers are humans, and
Yeah,
so it's both. It's absolutely, it's holding that awareness. And as a teacher, and I know you are as well, it's like the best thing that I can do is have my own therapist or have a group of other teachers that I connect with. And I'm like, am I off? Check me and make sure that and so that's because it's messy here. It's messy here. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. My favorite song at the moment is Messy. Oh, I can't remember her name. That's terrible. But look it up. She's a young lady, a young woman, um, who is messy, and her song is messy, and it's fantastic. And she just doesn't care how much she weighs. She doesn't care if she's got no makeup on. She doesn't care how she dresses. She doesn't care how she is with people. She's just messy, and it is brilliant. It
Mm,
really is. Yeah, life is messy. We are messy. We can't be perfect. We can't expect other people to, and you know, it's a messy world.
yeah. And here we are and keep going and doing our best through it. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's really wonderful to talk to you, Linda. Where can people find you?
LindaRauchMedium.com. So that's Rauch. People don't, they call me Rauch a lot because it's a German surname. My husband's German, but LindaRauchMedium.com is the best thing. And on Facebook is where I do most of my courses. So if they just look me up on Facebook, then my courses will come up, and I do all these introductory courses in witchcraft, tarot, and psychic mediumship. And I just
Amazing.
try and get people connected to their own guidance. It's the main thing with all those courses.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that we spoke before the recording for 5 minutes or something, and my feeling in my body was that you were giving me a little reading with what you said. You were encouraging my writing in a particular way, and it literally was exactly what I was working with today and what I needed to hear today. It sort of arrived at the perfect time and in the perfect way, and so I felt very clearly that the capacity that you have and that frequency and resonance that is so particular when you sit with someone who is connected. So highly recommended from the few minutes that you gifted me. Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Linda for that wonderful conversation. If you would like more information about her work, please check the show notes. And to find out more information about my work, groups, cohorts, or to book a one-on-one session with me, please visit robinlassiter.com.